Merry morning or magical midnight, my friends. I am Tillie Treadwell, and I have with me across the vibrations, across all the dimensions, Mr. Timothy Renner. Timothy, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to hear what we're going to get into tonight. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're most welcome. I hope it'll be one of many more. I know that you've been up to a lot recently, and I know that you have a beautiful history. Would you please share that with all of us and with me?
Sure. I mean, as far as the paranormal goes, I've been interested really my entire life. I like to say I was born into the golden age of Bigfoot. In the 1970s, it was the heels of the Patterson Gimlin film, the famous Bigfoot film
Mhm,
filmed in the
mhm.
60s, but we had In Search of on TV, all the different Bigfoot movies like The Legend of Boggy Creek and stuff. It was a great time to be into that. And I was as a kid. I absolutely loved it. But, I got a little older in my teenage years. I found punk rock and girls and kind of grew away from it. But I came back to it later,
Uh-huh.
and post internet, I started looking it up, and I found this very lively scene of the paranormal and Bigfoot and all these things that I loved so much as a kid. And I started getting more involved, and eventually wrote a couple articles for Weird Pennsylvania and Weird USA. I think they each had maybe one article of mine in there and some photos. And that inspired me to write my own books on the topic. And I've now written quite a few. Uh,
Mhm.
a lot on local legends, and then two books called Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and Volume 2, that deals with high strangeness and the Bigfoot phenomena. So I've got quite a few books in the paranormal realm out there. And I do my own podcast called Strange Familiars, where I talk to witnesses every week.
Wow, that is wonderful. I do believe that Where the Footprints End, you co-wrote that with Joshua Cutchin, right?
Indeed. Yep.
Yes, I'm really excited. I have you on right now, and then shortly I have Josh on, and I'm pretty excited about that. And we're gonna talk about your books as well. So,
Josh is a lovely human being. He was just here around Thanksgiving,
cool.
and took him out in the woods to a place where we see weird lights, and he got to see some weird lights. So it's good to see Josh. Haven't seen him since I think before the pandemic, but
Really?
yeah, he he was up north here, so it was good to see him.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about Josh, and I'm just so excited to be able to finally sit down with him. I've been a fan of his for several years now, and it's surreal to think that I'm finally going to meet the man, the myth, the legend myself. Yeah, but you were talking about the woods in your area and going out, seeing strange lights. Pennsylvania is your home, and the theme of tonight is home for the holidays. I would love to hear about some weird Pennsylvania stories that you have, especially around the holidays.
Well, I mean, do you want Pennsylvania holiday stories, or do you want like my own experiences? Because there's
Any and all, just tell me a story. How about that?
one of my favorite Pennsylvania uh, holiday things is the Belsnickel, which is made
I
famous
know that. Yeah.
made famous by The Office. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I saw it on The Office when Dwight dressed up as the Bels." But what we have in the Belsnickel is a an American survival of the European wild man tradition, which is it's
Mhm,
precious. It's so wonderful. They have a very very healthy wild man tradition in Europe,
mhm,
and over here it didn't survive too much. Now it did. Santa Claus is a wild man. We do
mhm,
have our wild men, but the Belsnickel is this very very healthy, very European take on this wild man myth. And if you read a lot of the accounts of the Belsnickel, how it behaves, it's very, very Bigfooty. I'm not saying
yeah,
they're the same thing, but I'm just saying they share a lot of characteristics.
for
Um, they,
sure.
they would howl in the night.
Mhm,
They would come and they would knock on the side of your house, knock on your windows. This is, total Bigfoot behavior. Um, they said, it would dress in furs, and there are different definitions. A lot of people say it means. Hold on, I have to look up on my in my book
Oh,
um,
sure.
the actual definition. Okay, yeah. So the name Belsnickel derives from Pelsnickel, believed to be a compound word from the German Pels, meaning pelts or furs, and nickel is in Saint Nicholas.
Oh.
Ergo, Belsnickel is literally Saint Nicholas in fur, a hairy wild man indeed. But another more interesting translation of Belsnickel comes from an 1872 newspaper article from the Reading Times. Quote, Professor Haldeman's work on Pennsylvania Dutch defines Belsnickel as follows. Pels, a pelt or a skin with hair, as in a
Mhm,
bear skin, here used as a disguise, and perhaps associated with peltsen, to pelt, that is to hit something, and nickel nix, and that is a sort of demon. So
mhm, mhm.
this other idea was sort of naming it as a demon in furs, which would be very,
Yeah,
very, very Bigfooty again. Uh,
yeah.
it was throw stones and so forth, and so we have this, and of course, bell snickling. People would dress up as bell snickle,
Mhm,
and it
mhm,
became associated with this Christmas uh, costume tradition
mhm.
where people would dress up, and it was almost like Halloween, a mumming tradition they would call it.
Yeah.
They would go door to door and they knock on the door, and they would often bring candy for the kids, and sometimes threaten the bad kids,
Right.
but so people would go, and they would call it bell snickling. They would go bell snickling. They would dress up, and sometimes they would shut down whole towns because kids would get, well, presumably kids, young adults, whoever was doing it would get quite rowdy when they were
Ooh.
doing it. But the actual tales of the Belsnickel and the way he acted, like I said, is very, very Bigfootish. So, like this howling in the night, they would come from the mountains covered in hair and knock on the windows and stuff. So that's
Yeah.
my favorite Pennsylvania weird holiday thing.
If I may, I have a funny story for you about the Belsnickel.
Hmm.
So I was originally born here in Florida, where I am right now, but I used to have a lot of older family members up in Ohio, which, as you know, is very close
Hmm.
to Pennsylvania. Well, I come from nearly an entirely purebred line of German and Irish people. So my grandma, my parents had me later in life, and they were just a very traditional German family in a lot of ways. But my grandma, by the time I came around, she was a little bit older, and she didn't have time for toddler nonsense, which I can understand. Toddlers are a lot of energy, and well, she brought to America straight from Germany the tradition of um, telling the Belsnickel story and making sure that there was some type of representation of the Belsnickel at Christmas time during that time in her home. So she had brought with her these dolls about this big, sometimes a little bit bigger, that were made from pine cones to represent the Belsnickel.
Hmm.
And she scared me because she would tell me that the Belsnickel was going to get me if I didn't stay out of certain areas of the house. So there was this one time I still remember this. I'm still scarred. So she was in the kitchen cooking, I believe it was Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner that year, and I was just a little kid. I was like 4 or something. She was tired of telling me to stay out of the kitchen while she was cooking because I was getting underfoot. So she knows I'm afraid of the Belsnickel. She knows I don't like those dolls. She takes the doll, and while I'm not looking, while I was like running laps around the house or something, she puts it right at the entrance to the kitchen. And I flip out because when I returned, that doll was there. It hadn't been there before. And she had these ones, they were crafted with like googly eyes
Hmm.
that she had replaced from the original one. So they were kind of creepy to me. They looked alive to me. And then they had little felt hands, and she had handmade, I found out later on, a little felt like backpack, kind of like what Krampus would wear,
Okay,
and
yeah.
and put it on his back with switches. And she told me that if I didn't stay out of the dang kitchen, that he was going to turn into his full-size self and beat me with the sticks in his pack.
That's
I
old
bet
school.
you, huh?
That's old school German. That is,
It was.
yeah,
Oh, she
yeah,
came straight from Germany.
yeah.
It scarred me though, and I've always remembered that story. Occasionally, I break it out to make someone laugh.
Well, there is such a beautiful and strong tradition of these wild men. So many of them are associated with Christmas. Krampus is the most famous one. People,
Yeah.
Krampus has gotten a lot of press over the years, but there's Hans Trapp is one from Alsace region. They called him the Christmas Scarecrow. He would actually eat children. They would scare children, say, because he would supposedly dressed as a scarecrow, and he would jump on kids as they walk by. They thinking he was just a scarecrow, and
Oh
they
no.
take him back to his place and try to cook him up. But he was struck by lightning before he could ever eat a child. But his spirit still roams, they say. But Frau Perkta, she's my favorite. She was a big one around Christmas time. They call her the Christmas belly slitter. If you had a
Uh-huh.
messy, if you had a messy house, she'd come in and cut open your belly and fill it with dirt and stuff. They're
I
real
think that's
brutal.
just my grandma reincarnated at this point.
But she, the interesting thing about her is that they said she had one or both feet were giant bird's feet, like a goose foot,
Yeah.
and you often get these three-toed tracks in association with Bigfoot, big three-toed tracks. And it's certainly, a goose foot, while there's actually more than three toes, but it appears to be three toes, the way it looks. One wonders about that because Perkta had two groups that followed her. One was called the Heimchen, and they were the souls of dead children, and they appeared as glowing orbs.
Yeah.
So we have orbs around the Bigfoot phenomenon. And the other were the Perkten, and they were a group of hairy wild men that followed her around that would terrorize towns and so forth. So it's hard not to connect this stuff with Bigfoot for me. It's all very, very Bigfooty. But no, I love it. I love these wild man traditions for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree entirely. So I was hoping that you could give me some true experiences tonight about your own strange encounters over there in Pennsylvania. Do you mind?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, the closest one to Christmas I have is my investigation partner and I, Chad. We do a solstice hike every year on the solstice. It's just a thing we do. We just started doing it one year, and we do it every year.
Hmm.
And one year we had gone to it's a place called White Rocks, and it's a trail that goes up a mountain. It's a very, very rocky trail, and it connects to the Appalachian Trail. And this was, December 21st. It was a few years back. It was about 9 degrees. So this is very, very cold. And we hiked to the top of the mountain, about where it meets the Appalachian Trail, and we saw lights. It looked like somebody had maybe some lanterns down the way, down
Uh-huh.
on the AT. And we're looking at it, and we're like, wow, this is like a very cold night for people to be out just hanging out, with some
Mhm.
lanterns. No fire. You would
Mhm.
have a fire going if you were camping for sure on a night like that. No fire, and we're looking at these lights, and it was just odd. There shouldn't be any lights up there. There was no one else around. It's uh, midnight, I think, around this time. By the time we hit the top of the mountain, it was about midnight. And as we're looking, I saw a red light close to us in the woods, and then another red light lit up right beside it. And I'm not saying it was eyes, but it certainly looked like red eyes. There were two red lights
Oh,
that were right beside each other,
oh.
and very close to us, a lot closer, about half the distance from the other ones. I can't really guess how far away the other lights were. Maybe hundreds of yards. I don't know whether, 150 or 200 yards, but this was, easily half that distance. Probably I would estimate this at 50 yards or closer away, these red lights. And Chad said, "Hey, I think it's time to go." And I said, "All right."
I
I
wonder why.
didn't have to convince me. And so we start going, and then all of a sudden, Chad from behind me says, "Hey, Tim, hurry up as fast as you
Oh,
can go without hurting yourself. Please
oh
go."
no. Oh
It's a,
no.
it's a very, very rocky trail. It's very, very dangerous.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So, I made my way as best as I could, and once we got a little bit, halfway down the mountain or so, I said, "Why did you tell me that?" He said, "I looked behind, and those red eyes had moved behind us up on the mountain. They were off
Ooh.
the trail before." He said they had moved behind us, and he said they looked like they were coming our way. I was
Oh
like, "Oh boy."
no.
So Chad is an extremely he's I love doing investigations with Chad because he's very dependable and he's not easily scared. So when he tells me
No.
something like that, I know it's serious.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I can only imagine the self-discipline and the self-awareness and the empathy it took for him to slow down in the moment and tell you, please move as quickly as you can without hurting yourself. Because I think most people would have absolutely wigged out.
Yeah,
So bless him for that. Bless
and
him
that's
for
that's what I need in an investigation partner. I have MS. I can't move as fast as I did when I was young. I'm blessed to still be able to get out there and hike and do everything, but I'm not running out of anywhere. I'm gonna fast walk at best out of where
yeah.
we are, and I need to know whoever's there with me isn't going to leave me, and for sure he
Aw.
won't. He won't. He's a absolutely dependable in that. So I'm very, very lucky to have him by my side.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. Does he have any website presence or social media? Can we give him like a shout out here?
He is on Strange Familiars quite frequently, so you can often find him there. He has Ruck Rabbit Outdoors podcast, which is coming soon. He's going to be starting his own podcast, which is a little bit more oriented towards the woodsman and the woodcraft kind of thing, the outdoorsman type stuff. But he'll get into paranormal stuff too because it's part of the story with so many people who've been outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, friends, if you want to support a rock solid, dependable person, there we have it. His friend Chad is how you say it, right?
Chad Redding. Yep, he's a good guy. So
Right.
he helped me do the research. I have a book called The Witch Cloud where it's gets into haunted bridges in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And Chad helped me do the research, and he was literally there every step of the way with me. It's really cool thing. So he did everything but write the book. I actually wrote it, but he was there with me. He helped me interview people. He was did a lot
Oh,
of the research with me and stuff. So yeah, he's a big part of that as well.
that's wonderful. When I was doing research on you for tonight, I didn't see that book, but now I'm going to have to go back and look because haunted bridges are kind of my thing. I'm
Oh,
obsessed
really?
with Oh yeah, I'm obsessed. I love liminal spaces. I don't know why. I am just psychologically very strangely drawn to them.
See,
And
it's, you said the magical word. I had a book, there's another book on just the haunted bridges of America or something. And it's very interesting because the guy lists tons of haunted bridges, state by state, all these different haunted bridges. Really, really interesting. But he doesn't get into like why are bridges haunted at
yeah,
all. And
yeah,
one of the things, one of my, I don't want to call it a conclusion, but one of my thoughts on the issue was that it's hard to find a more liminal space than a bridge.
yeah. Especially a covered bridge, in my opinion and my experience, because it's a semi-dwelling, it's a structure, but not really in the way that other structures are inhabited. Like barns are usually inhabited by animals and homes and businesses by human people, but bridges are completely different in that way. And
Mhm.
oh, it's fascinating. I think that if if I were a less corporeal, creepy crawly, bridges would be one of my first bets.
Yeah, I mean, they traverse running water. You have that connection
Ah,
often, not always, but often.
off.
It's pretty cool. I just and to be honest, the first time I went to it's basically there's two bridges that are right in line with each other. There's the famous Sachs Covered Bridge. If you've ever seen any like haunted Gettysburg program, they've almost certainly done a story on Sachs Covered Bridge. But there's another one that you can walk to from Sachs Covered Bridge. It's about probably 3/4 of a mile. We would walk back and forth
Mhm.
between them. And that bridge is built after the Civil War. It's an iron bridge, and the locals call it Suicide Bridge. And the legend is that someone had hanged themselves on the bridge.
Uh-huh.
But I can find no evidence of that ever happening. I'm not saying it didn't. It could
Yeah.
have, but I've
Yeah.
done extensive research, and I could find no newspaper articles or anything stating that anybody had hanged themselves on that bridge. But locals come and they bring that energy to it, right? They bring
Yeah.
that energy, and
Yeah.
I think that plays into it. But again, Chad, on top of all this, he also tends to be very sensitive to this stuff. And the first time I went to this suicide bridge, I had done the research. I was like, no, nobody, what's the big deal? Nobody, hang themselves here. It's kind of earlier in my career into the paranormal before I would take into consideration, like, well, wait, but people bring the energy there thinking that people hang themselves, and that might have something to do with
Yeah.
it. This
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just me taking the story at face value, and having debunked it, I was kind of like, what's the big deal? I don't, nothing here. Although that day, there was one strange thing that happened that day. I was with two friends, and my one friend had to relieve himself, and he went into the bushes, and I jokingly drove away like I was going to leave him there, and turned around and came back for him. Just I went up maybe 100 yards and turned around and came back for him. And he got in the car, and he's very angry with me. And he said the whole tree started, the whole brush all around him started shaking. And he was pretty shook up when he got back in the car. So that did happen the first time, but I didn't make anything of it until I went back with Chad. And the first time I went there with Chad, he literally showed me his arm, and the hair on his arm is sticking straight up in the air. And
Mhm.
he's like, he started getting sick in this one
Mhm.
one area near the bridge. And he said the only thing he kept saying to me is whatever's here is very old. He's like,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
um come to find out that there was, before the Battle of Gettysburg, there was a very large battle of Native Americans there. And they always said it was in the Indian field. And I found this out after writing the book. This would have been great to go in the book, but my research never ends. Um, the place they call the Indian field nowadays is near what's called Devil's Den. Just it's in the military park. But I found out recently that back before the actual place of the battle that they call the Indian field, where this battle happened, would have been right beside this bridge, right beside it.
Wow.
So, and to me, it isn't like, oh, are these Native American spirits? To me, it's like, no, what was there that drew these people in to have this conflict? These two
Yeah.
huge battles, this huge Native American battle, several hundred years before the Europeans got here, and then the Battle of Gettysburg. What is it about this place
Mhm.
that that people were drawn to that to happen? And we began to call it, because so many different phenomena would happen around. Um, we there was a folklorist from Pennsylvania. His name is Shoemaker, and
Huh.
he had written an article about what he called the witch cloud, and he was talking about the idea of the witch cloud is where like multiple things could happen. People could have like the specter elks, along with werewolves and vampires and all this stuff like together. And they said it was like a witch cloud had moved over the place. So there's this term that existed in Pennsylvania folklore called the witch cloud. And we began to refer to that area as that, because we were getting people telling us, they were saying, oh yeah, this bridge is haunted. And then they would describe essentially seeing Bigfoot walk across the bridge. I'm like, okay. you know, uh, People were seeing weird lights. We were getting poltergeist activity, which we got on tape. You can
Uh-huh.
hear it knocks
Uh-huh.
and bangs all over the bridge, like
Mhm.
constantly. Very, very strange stuff. So this collection of all this odd activity, and like I said, Pennsylvania already had a name for it. It's called the Witch Cloud. So that's why we named the book that. But Chad from the beginning was very insistent. There's something old here,
Uh-huh.
and it
Uh-huh.
turned out he was right.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to work as the intuitive lead, you could say, for a paranormal group. And like your friend, I would go to places and often just know that there was someone or something there very old and very in control of the area for the most part. And I found that when people bring their energy to a place and they give it a label and a name, and then they prescribe some type of event or whatever to it, whether it's real or not, like you were saying with your research, I find that that provides food, you could say,
Hmm.
for this person or this phenomenon, this creature, whatever. It's energy building in my experience. And I think that it all results in a massively active area with several different types of activity. And then on top of that, we may also be having magnetic, you could say, anomaly zones as well in that area.
Oh yeah.
Steve Mera, do you know who he is?
I'm not
Steve
sure.
Mera?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, so Steve Mera is from the UK, I want to say, and he is working on a series right now on YouTube with a channel called UAMN TV. He calls it Project Doorway. And he talks about how it seems to him that um, magnetic anomaly zones are highly involved in areas of extreme high strangeness, poltergeist activity, Bigfoot sightings, etc. And I do think that this life is just very fascinating and complex.
Well, someone had sent me U.S. Geological Survey maps of the different areas that I frequent. Not that area in Gettysburg, although now that you mention that, I'm going to go look at it. But
Yeah.
the two areas that I dig into frequently is an area called Toad Road. I've written two books about it, and
Mhm,
then Hex Hollow, both of which we were talking a little bit before we hit record about these two areas,
mhm.
and they both. Toad Road is an actual road. It's an old towpath that runs along a creek. And if you look at the magnetic anomaly map, there's a huge magnetic anomaly that follows that creek, just like the road. It follows that
Yeah.
creek out to the river, just like the road does. And then there's another one in that place, Hex Hollow. There's one in an area that I can't tell where it is because it's on private property, but we call it Site 7. It's just a code name where we
Mhm.
see weird lights quite frequently. There's one there. So this bears out in my research. What it
Okay.
means, I don't know, but there are magnetic anomalies at these places,
Yeah. I have found that as a sensitive, that when I do go into areas of higher electronic activity or magnetic activity, or maybe a bit of both, or when like the air is charged with a thunderstorm or whatnot, I do notice that there is a strong physical difference in the atmosphere. And I wonder if other types of people are able to use these types of charges in order to gain enough energy to be here more physically for a while. That's my personal theory.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I that sunlight dissipates them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So like um I'm gonna edit this little part out, but so 754. For example, like I'm deathly allergic to sunlight. And I'm considered highly psychic, and I've got the Rh negative blood and everything. And so I think that a lot of this, like ties together. And I wonder if too it's not related to other
I
phenomena.
mean, it's quite possible. The I try not to put all my eggs in any one basket, because I think it's probably a both end thing. Like I have a checklist of things I ask people. Like when I if I you call me out for a Bigfoot, I'm going to get the details of the Bigfoot sighting, everything that happened. But then I'm going to ask you a series of other questions.
Mhm.
Where's the nearest creek? Now I'm
Hmm.
not determined whether there's always a creek nearby, but I haven't determined whether this is just because Pennsylvania has a lot of creeks, or
Yeah.
or are these things somehow tied to the creeks? I always ask, is there a I call it buried treasure theory, and I mean that in the most general sense. Is there a mine? Is there a legend of buried treasure? Is there the idea of something valuable being in the ground, a quarry, anything like that? Not 100% of the time, but very often, yes. There's something here. People tell me legends. I was contacted by someone recently
Mhm.
who had some high strangeness Bigfoot stuff happening on their property, and the BFRO guy was there, and he said like none of this is related. He only wanted to hear about the Bigfoot stuff. And I was talking to him. I said, well, let me ask you some questions. Like, are you seeing strange lights? He said, yes. I said, okay. I said, is there a quarry nearby? And I said, there's a quarry on our land. I said, okay. I said, what about mines? And they're like, well, I don't know. And then the guy came back a couple of days later and said, oh yeah, there's actually the only registered gold mine in this state, this particular state. I'm not going to give it away, but
Of course,
uh,
of course.
was on his property. So there's these things that I ask, these this sort of checklists. And so what is it? So is it the magnetic anomaly is another thing, right? Right. I don't know if any one thing's the cause, but these things seem to be in common. And so I hesitate to say, well, that's the reason or that's it, but I can definitely say like they're there. You know what I mean? These things are around. Now, what's the connection? That's the big question.
I agree. I agree. Um, Here in Florida, we have at minimum, a few state parks. And I used to live, well, my husband and I used to live a few years ago about 10 minutes away from one. And they have some beautiful springs and creeks and whatnot running through that area. Um, the year that we lived there was one of the most paranormally active years of our lives. And so we had two Glimmerman sightings. Are you familiar with that
Oh
type of
yeah.
thing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in our house.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we had, well, I'm sorry, I had a um a pale crawler type humanoid experience right in the backyard. My husband said that I shouldn't worry though, because he thinks it's just a frog eater. He calls it a frog eater. But of course, I don't know. Um, what else? He saw a what he calls a like a little house fairy or something in one of his clients' houses for the first, last, and only time while we were living there. What else was there? Oh yeah, I had a bunch of weird owl experiences at that time too. And then we had a few UFO encounters as well, all while living at this one house near this state park.
Mhm.
And it was so bad, not bad like negative necessarily, but it was just so frequent that at the end of the term of the year lease, we were offered to renew. And I told him I didn't want to renew because I couldn't function with all of that going there. It was always something new every single day.
Yeah, that's the paranormal researcher, question that people often get. It's like, do you ever investigate your own house? Why would I want to? I have to
Exactly.
sleep here.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I've had things happen here, but I don't want them to happen here. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to prod it. I'm not going to poke it. I need to sleep.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the people who whip out the EVP recorder and stuff in the middle of their dark bedroom and whatnot, I don't know how they do it. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean,
Whatever. I mean,
yeah.
to each their own, I suppose. But oh my gosh. So the other day, this was like, what is today? Dang, what is today?
It was
Monday, right?
Monday, December 4th.
Right. On December 2nd, my hubby and I were supposed to go to a vendor event because we do those sometimes.
Mhm.
And the night before, we were doing the usual event prep. And we went to bed with about 5 hours to get a bit of a nap. Well, when we woke up, we each had to go pee at 4:15. Alarm was set for 5:30. We noticed that there was a big oval round wet spot in the carpet right outside of our bathroom door, which is like 5 feet away from his side of the bed, right? we didn't think too much of it. We're like, oh my gosh, there's something paranormal up to something, whatever. We just want to go to sleep. We're just so used to it at this point, you know? So I'm up for the rest of the time, just laying in bed on my tablet, doing business stuff. He goes back to sleep. I got up at 5:30 and I went out into the front area of the house. On our dryer top, we keep a water filtration system that is connected to the washer dryer hookup, you know?
Mhm.
And somehow overnight, despite both of us going to bed at the same time, double checking that everything was off, someone or somehow this knob, which is really hard to turn, it had turned itself on. And it had to have been running for at least half an hour at
Mm.
minimum, but maybe I'm suspecting longer. So the dryer that it's on top of is, we find later flooded out. The front bathroom is flooded in a very peculiar way. And then we realized that somehow the flooding had gone under the tile of the household, gone underneath the wall, and flooded the carpet
Oh,
in the
geez.
bathroom. But it gets even weirder. So I turn off the system and I go and I wake my husband up. I'm like, honey, I need you to get up right now because you must have left it on last night because he was technically the last one in and out, even though I in my sleepy mind I had forgotten that there's no way either one of us could have done it. It's
Mhm.
just habit, blame the hubby when all else fails, right? So he rolls over and he looks at me and he's like, dear, I didn't leave it on and I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, come on, you got to get up. You got to see this. I need help cleaning this up. We have an event in a few hours and I'm so overwhelmed. He gets up, he goes out, we look at it, and both of us are dumbfounded after talking about it for a few minutes. Well, I still have to do laundry. So I go to um, see how wet it is and, restart it and whatnot. And um, we both hear clear as day when I start up the dryer again, tons of water sloshing in the bottom part of the dryer, which was very strange because there was nothing in the drum. It shouldn't have been sloshing anywhere. The dryer is hollow. I'm sure you're somewhat
Yeah.
familiar with dryers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I told you, I'm allergic to the sunlight. And it was supposed to be a cloudy day. That's what the forecast was saying. We got to the event place, which was only 10 minutes away at most with traffic. And as soon as we start setting up, which by the way was half an hour late because of this fiasco, the sun starts breaking through the clouds and then all the clouds part. And it dawned on me that if we had been there on time and set up on time because of a mistake that the event coordinators made, I would have been in deep medical trouble. And so I began to wonder if this wasn't some type of blessing kind of in disguise or a guardian of some type, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it gets even weirder from here. We go home deciding to cancel, and I'm counting my lucky stars, and we're talking about getting a new dryer. He has to turn off the breaker and tear apart the dryer. He's like, I'm going to try to save the dryer. I'm going to sop up whatever water I can and see if I can get it to run and to work and whatnot. So he pulls apart this dryer and we examine it together. There is no water anywhere, anywhere.
Hmm.
Whereas we had heard that there was enough, there had to have been gallons of water
Right.
in this thing. He pulled it completely apart. I watched him myself. There was no water. And there should have been because the water jugs and whatnot were sitting right by the lint trap. And the lint trap leads into the bottom of the dryer and everything. There was nothing. It was bone dry.
I could use, so our washer's leaking now. So if you could send the dryer repair spirits up to
Yeah,
Pennsylvania, I could use that.
I'll relay that message.
But
I feel crazy relaying such a
oh
story,
no,
but it's stuff like that where people, before I got involved in these kinds of things, no one would believe me.
no, yeah, it's I've grown sort of fearless about it because I talk about it so much on the podcast. And originally I wanted every episode to be what we call an on-site episode, where we go to a haunted place or we go on a Bigfoot investigation and take the listeners with us. Can't always
Yeah,
do that. You just can't make stuff happen. I've learned that over time.
no,
Sometimes you go and it's really boring. You go out and nothing happens. That's the way things are.
yeah, yeah.
Sometimes you go on a Bigfoot thing and bam, the witnesses don't want to be recorded. And that, of course,
Mhm,
that's understandable as well.
mhm.
So, can't do that all the time, but it happens where we run into stuff a lot. We run into a lot of strange stuff. And I don't know whether it's because we notice it, because we sort of trained ourselves to like, okay, we're going to notice the weird lights and we're going to point them out, where other people might just be like,
Yeah,
just walk by it.
yeah.
Or is it happening more because we're looking for it? Or is it tuned to us in a sense, you know,
Mhm.
or some combination of all these things? I don't know. But I definitely think when I started all this, I would have been a lot more fearful about saying like how much I
Yeah,
saw, and now it's just like, wow, believe me or don't, this is what we saw, this is what happened. So yeah, I totally get that. It's like trying to relate this stuff to people. Sometimes it's like, okay, I know how crazy I sound, but
yeah, yeah. It happened. And for me, I did a few years of extreme on-site clinical training. So I was part of a pretty elite trauma recovery training team. And I was being trained to be certified to become a trauma care specialist, so a type of psychologist.
mhm,
And I quit 2 years in because just a multitude of different factors. But because I have that training and I'm sensitive to psychology, I'm always trying my best to be objective and fair. But some of the things that I've experienced, to me from a clinical standpoint, sound absolutely bonkers. And I
right.
struggle with that
Hmm.
sometimes,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Oh yeah, it's just batty stuff happens sometimes. And whatever. Yeah, I just like
Yeah.
I said, people can believe me or not. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
Uh
that's fair, I think.
it's the I had that place Site 7 where we saw the lights. I have a very good friend named John who's he does he's a farmer and a naturalist and foraging. He teaches foraging classes and stuff like that. And I was telling him about it and he said, "Take me there. I'm going to tell you what those lights are." He said there's an explanation for them. I said,
Hmm.
"Okay. I'm open
Yeah,
to that." I said,
yeah.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll hike into this area. It's a very long hike, but you can actually park in a town. You can hike the river and then hike up the mountain to this area where we were seeing the lights. So let's
Okay.
hike in there during the day and we'll sit there until nighttime. And we're going to sit right in the area where we see the lights.
Hmm.
And I said, if you can explain to me what they are, please do. I'm completely open to that. It's fine. I'm not married to this idea of them being, I'm just telling you what I saw and what we experienced.
Mhm.
And I took him there and it's getting dark and he's like, I think I see something. I said, John, don't do that. I said, you're going to know. You will know when you see something. Don't,
Right.
it's not going to be the kind of thing where you like, I think maybe I see something. Like, don't convince yourself. Wait until you definitely see something. If you don't see something, that's fine too.
Mhm.
Well, by the end of the night, he was on his knees and these lights actually approached us. They had never approached us before. They actually approached us. He was on his knees trying to catch one of these lights in his hands because they had come that close to us, laughing out loud and saying, I don't know what these are. I don't know what these are. Completely blown away. So that's the kind of example I use to people. It's like John was ready to debunk this stuff. He was ready to say, like, this is something natural. I'll tell you what it is, or it's something man made. We'll figure it out. And
Mhm.
then by the end of the night, he's and you know he wasn't he wasn't a hard skeptic. You know, he was open to the idea of things being there, but he was definitely determined to debunk this, to turn it into something natural or man-made. And then by the end of the night, he was, you know, firmly convinced. And that convinced of what? You know, convinced that something odd's going on. I don't know, you know, we don't have any explanation for it.
Uh-huh.
But that's the example I'd like to use. It's like, you know, everybody's a skeptic until it happens to them, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I agree. That's a great story, though. That sounds like maybe the kind of place that even I would want to go and check out for myself.
If you're ever in
Um,
Pennsylvania, let me know.
Heck yeah, I would so be down for that. Oh, funny enough, my show is called The Weird Walk Home. And originally it was an idea between myself and Tim Swartz, if you're familiar with him.
The name's familiar.
Yes, yeah. Okay, he's one of the men seen on shows like The Unexplained and Ancient Aliens and
Okay.
whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a good buddy of mine, and I'm an author with his publishing house, and now he's coming on to my show. He's going to be on every 6 weeks. Um, but oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I just totally got sidetracked. Oh, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. Um, we we were originally it was going to be a podcast and a video show, but I called it The Weird Walk Home because the deep core idea was for me to at some point go and actually take walks with people and talk about the paranormal,
Oh, that's
and
cool.
maybe just have like a coffee and hang out and be out in nature chatting about Fortean ideas and experiences. And um as a plug, I have invitations now, and if you're sincere about yours, this makes it 4 states: New York, um, oh God, what is it? New York, New Jersey, Georgia, and then Pennsylvania would
Sure.
be
Yeah.
yours.
I've taken other
And
podcasters there and they've seen stuff. I can't
yeah,
guarantee it because there are times we go there and nothing happens, but a lot of times we go there and we see these weird lights. So,
so I'm trying to raise money though to actually do these walks. Because someday I really do want to go and meet people and have these adventures in person.
mhm.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just let me know. There's more than one place to go here for sure.
Sweet. Absolutely. As soon as I'm able, for sure. And then there are books that I want to write, and there's a paranormal themed e-shop with gourmet hand blended dessert teas that I make that I want to offer people too. So there's a lot in the works. It's tough being new, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get there.
Yes, absolutely. But invitation accepted. Oh my gosh, I wanted to let you know about something else that happened recently that you might find fascinating because you had talked about wood knocks earlier.
Hmm.
So recently I had the pleasure of hosting Mike Cleland. Do you know him
I know
or know
Mike
him?
very well. I know Mike very well. We've spent some time together at different conferences and so forth. Lovely human being. Lovely human being.
Yes, I really enjoyed my time with him. So much so that after the recorded show portion ended, we spent a significant amount of time just talking and sharing stories. And while he was chatting me up, I have a large antique carved wood dresser right off camera, less than less than 10 feet away. And I've never had anything paranormal ever happen with this thing. And I've had it for a good number of years now. Mike was telling me this intense story about a friend of his who had an experience with a large owl, I believe. And there were other elements involved, but you know, owls are Mike's thing. And out of nowhere, in the middle of Mike telling me this story, I hear a massive knock coming from the inside of my dresser nearest to where I am. So in one of the three drawers or the side panel by me, closest to me. It is so loud that the my tablet captured it. I have it on tape. And I stopped Mike and I'm like, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but did you hear that? And now I have this awesome, what I call piece of evidence. And I don't know. I find it really interesting.
Mm.
I've never personally had a wood knock until that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know how much time you have. I have a
sure.
somewhat long Mike Clelland related owl story. It's
Yeah, please.
vaguely Mike Clelland related. It's related as much as it happened as I was reading his book, or right on the tail end of reading his book. So I read The Messengers, which is his book about owls and contactees.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a review video on that soon, actually, for my channel with his blessing.
There is one person in that book who
Mhm.
said she could essentially, manifest owls in a sense. She would go out into the woods and she would just say to the woods out loud, "I would like to see an owl today," and she would walk and she would see an owl. Right. So this is at a place called Hex Hollow. It's a place that I've been visiting for years. Lots of strange stuff happens there.
Mhm.
And I go there one day and I didn't. I'm not opposed to owls, but I like owls are Mike's thing, right?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I like skulls and bones and stuff as long as they're not gory. So I thought I'm going to try this, but I'm not going to ask to see an owl. I'm going to ask for antlers. I said I would like to find antlers today. I say that to the woods, right?
Uh-huh.
And I go off on my merry way. I'm walking down the trail, and I see something moving, bright out of the corner of my eye. It's in the breeze. It's blowing in the breeze. It's stuck in a tree off the trail, maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 yards. And it catches my eye because it's white. And I thought somebody had, sometimes people will leave their garbage around. Sometimes they will change their children's diapers and just tie them in a plastic bag and hang them on a tree. And
I hate that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I consider it my duty as I use the parks to clean up a little bit. It's
Oh,
the least I can do. So I carry a bag with me and end up taking other people's garbage out with me sometimes.
excellent.
Uh, so I'm very irritated when I see this because like, oh, now I have to go through the brush and get whatever this is and clean it up. It shouldn't be there. Kind of thinking it's a plastic bag. Well, as I get closer to it, I'm like, well, that's not a plastic bag. And I get up to it, and what it is, it's the entire tail section, not just one feather, the entire tail section of a barn owl. The whole tail, all the feathers are stuck. Are This wasn't a thorn tree, but it had like one sharp little spot, and it was pressed on to the sharp spot on this tiny branch, and that's what was blowing. So I asked for antlers, and I got owls anyway, right? I got the tail section of a barn owl.
Mhm.
So I take it and I go, and uh, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about owls, and I'm thinking about like, that's strange. At the same time, I'm writing these books on Bigfoot. I had written before Where the Footprints End. I had written two books on historical Bigfoot encounters, Bigfoot in Pennsylvania and Bigfoot West Coast Wildmen. These are take a lot of old newspaper articles where I believe they're speaking about Bigfoot. I reprint them and then
Oh,
I add my commentary. And I'd been working on those books and illustrating them. And I was kind of tired of drawing Bigfoot. That may be the only time you ever hear me say it. I love drawing Bigfoot. But I was doing a lot of it, and I was thinking like, what else can I do? What else can I do? And I found the Life of Merlin, and I thought, oh, that'll be fun to illustrate. Like it's already written. It's public domain. Comes from an old manuscript or something.
mhm.
So I thought, well, I'll illustrate that. That'll give me something different to illustrate. Keep that in mind. Then I go
Okay.
to this antique store,
Mhm.
and I had no intention of collecting owls, but there's a whole shelf of someone's obviously sold their collection of owl figurines. Most of this shelf is very sort of realistic looking ceramic owls
Mhm.
of various sorts. And I thought, well, I don't want to start collecting owls, but I'm going to pick one of these, right? I'm going to pick one of these and I'm going to get it. And there was a wood one that was carved in kind of a folk art style. It was bigger than the other ones. And I was sort of drawn to that one. So I picked it up and I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, I think this one's going home with me. They were only $1 each.
Mhm.
And I turned it around, and on the back side of this owl is carved a wizard's face. So here I'm saying, like, I should illustrate this Merlin story.
Oh, uh-huh.
So next, I'm back in Hex Hollow. This is a few days later, maybe the next week, and I'm
Mhm.
hiking down a trail, and I'm thinking about all of this, and this thought hits me that Merlin had a period where he was considered a wild man. He there was a great battle, and he a lot of young people died, and he kind of felt responsible for that. And they say he sort of went mad, went off into the woods, learned how to speak to the animals, and they call that his wild man period. And I actually have a print of this on my wall in my studio, uh, by Alan Lee, the great artist who did a lot of the Lord of the Rings design work
Oh,
and so forth.
yeah.
And he had drawn Merlin as Wildman, and this is one of my favorite pieces of artwork. Like I said, I've lucky enough to have a signed print of it, and so it hits me that, like, so Merlin's a wild man, Bigfoot's a wild man, that I can't get away from wild men, right? Like, even I decided to do this without thinking about this, and so I was like, oh, Merlin's still a wild man. I'm still doing this. I'm